All right. Welcome back to the Veterans Club podcast. This is Jeffrey Silas, your host, alongside my co-host today, Joe Palacios. Today, we're going to be talking about servant leadership. And this is one of my favorite topics because this is something that is near and dear to the hearts of our fellow veterans. You see, veterans, when they get out, they don't stop serving. Many of them serve in community, in the business world, and including the halls of Congress. Why is that? It's because they are in search of a new mission and purpose. And today's guest is a great example of that, Mr. Carlos Cardenas, who is a fellow Marine Corps veteran. He is a technology executive in the nonprofit sector. And he also sits on the boards of many organizations, to include co-founding a Veterans Chamber of Commerce in the Illinois, Chicago region, which I'm looking forward to talk about that. He is also a co-founder as well for the Association of Professionals Latinos, to get more Latinos represented in the association profession. He is also a past chair of the Technology Advisory Council. Probably many other associations. And bottom line, he is a community leader, someone that I hope you guys can take notes from and learn and connect. So Carlos Cardenas, thank you so much, man, for joining us on the Veterans Club.
Thank you for having me, Jeffrey. Appreciate it. On a Saturday morning too. Yeah, go ahead.
Yes, sir. Thank you so much, man. So let's dive into it, man. Let's talk a little bit about your background. So did you grow up in Chicago? Where's your family's origins from?
Yeah, grew up in Chicago, born and raised in Chicago's Little Village neighborhood. Single mom. My dad skipped town when I was a baby, right? So didn't really know him. My mom struggled, right? So that's kind of what I saw, right? So Chicago's Little Village neighborhood is almost like the Mexico of the Midwest. And so you've got a large, population of immigrants, undocumented as well, right? Who congregate to Little Village because maybe it's political asylum. But that's the backdrop of my upbringing, right? So, we say we're a byproduct of our environment. And so definitely a byproduct of that. All around us, growing up, I saw immigrants working two jobs, even my mom, right? So just struggling, single mom of four, trying to put food on the table. And so that's kind of all around you. In addition to that, you have a backdrop of gangs, right? And violence in the hood, right? So you had to kind of figure out how to kind of maneuver that, not get involved with the wrong crowds, things like that. So I'll stop there to see if you have any questions.
Well, I grew up in a similar environment as well, right? In Fresno, California, lots of blue-collar neighborhood, gang warfare. My father was a bracero, so I know exactly what you're talking about. And it is, to me, I think those are one of the best experiences that I ever had, man, because it taught me a lot about resilience and survival and being resourceful, and getting up early, because my father would get me up really, really early. So I think that served me well and acclimate to the Marine Corps. So I think the Marine Corps was just a natural fit for me here. So let's talk a little bit about why you joined the Corps. I know you joined around, the 90s era?
96 is when I joined. Not a whole lot of opportunity, right? Again, I mentioned single mom, so there was no college funds there. You didn't have any scholarship opportunities. And so I just didn't see myself going to college, and I saw the opportunities around me, and I just didn't want to go down that road. I talked about this a couple of weeks ago, but I would see my mom come back, from work and, ask us to massage her back, rub her feet, just based on how tired she was. And I just didn't want that for myself, right? I had a couple odd jobs in terms of, car wash, and it just didn't click with me, man. So I just needed an escape. And so, I was fortunate enough to have, family legacy of, service. And then I had a close buddy who joined the Marine Corps a year before me. So he came back, shit hot Marine, in his dress blues, came back and, talked me into, even went to talk to my mom, to say like, hey, this is an opportunity. It could change, your son's life. And so, I was hooked at that point. So I set about, trying to finish up my senior year of high school, enlisted in the Marine Corps in 1996. Kind of a culture shock, right? It's like, what the heck is this, right? And so, you're shipped off to San Diego, you're put on a bus and you get off and you step on these yellow footprints, and, all of a sudden it's just chaotic, right? Get in the chair, and the hair that you have is gone, and so it's just a whole new world. I think things started to realize like, wow, this is real. When you get out of the transition barracks, right, and you go to your platoon, and then you're introduced to your drill instructors, and then just the madness happens, right? So you just had to adapt and acclimate to that, right? You've got a platoon of 80 Marines, and so how do you stand out? How do you differentiate yourself, from those other Marines? Because it's a competition, right? You've got your platoon guide, you've got your squad leaders, and so you're looking at those types of positions. So just a complete culture shock, and I can't tell you how many doors it's opened, and it just set the foundation for other things that came afterwards. So that's my transition into the Marine Corps, right? I can talk extensively about that, but any specific questions that you want to unpack?
Well, I just want to know, man, if the dragon commercial sold you like it sold me, man, because I thought I was gonna go fight dragons for a little bit.
Yeah, I did pay attention to those, recruiting commercials. I think the dragon was one of them. I think rock climbing was another one, right? That just like, hey, what's this about here? I'm not sure if I thought I was going to slay dragons, but just motivated, you to join. And so
yeah, man.
so,
I always get folks there, man, because that's something that what I love about the Corps, though, man. It's just the esprit of the Corps. Go ahead, Joe.
No, I just have to agree with you guys. I think we had the best recruiting commercials in the 90s. Like, I joined in 92, so like that whole mid to early 90s, really great recruiting commercials, really kind of did a lot of really cool stuff about what you're going to not necessarily do in the Marine Corps, but it was fun. Like, I thought those were really great. I was curious, Carlos, because I grew up in Houston, right? And I actually noticed that there is a kind of like this corridor of Houston to Chicago as far as like a Latino population. Like I know that I have extended family in Chicago and my family used to talk about going up to Chicago and down all the time. And again, correct me if I'm wrong, but Chicago is pretty much divided kind of like most main cities, right? You'll have each little neighborhood. And as you were talking about growing up in the neighborhood, I recognize similarities of the neighborhoods that I grew up. So before you actually joined the Marine Corps, I'm getting to my question slowly but surely, because I think there's kind of this theme for guys that grew up the way we did. And I think the three of us have similar growing up in a mostly Hispanic neighborhood, hardworking. Now, there was a lot of stuff going on that we didn't necessarily are a part of or just didn't kind of attach to us specifically, but was in our neighborhoods. But we also got to see that hardworking initiative that people have in those small neighborhoods. Was there anything else before the Marine Corps that you can remember that kind of pulled at your heart towards service before actually enlisting?
I mean, I remember distinctly growing up, right, and I see my grandfather's picture, right? He was a World War II Army veteran, and so I saw that, in my childhood. An uncle of mine also served in the Army, and so I just knew that the service was part of our family. I didn't know it would be my turn, one day. And you mentioned the corridor between Houston, Texas. That's actually my family background, right? So my mom and my mother's side, San Antonio, Texas, not Houston, right? But if you go back further, I can trace both my mom and my dad to Mission, Texas. So Texas is a huge part of, my upbringing. Going to San Antonio for, Fiesta, I think it is, but that connection has always been there, for Texas. So to answer your question, things that I thought about before joining the Marine Corps, again, that was the backdrop of growing up. And so I thought about it. I never quite saw myself in that role until I was probably a senior in high school. So it had some influence for sure in my decision.
Thanks, Joe.
Thank you.
Carlos, so you were in the Corps for about 5 years. I read something in your background that you were stationed in Okinawa, and you're providing some support as well, man, to the Pentagon and the Commandant of the Marine Corps. Is that correct?
Yeah, so first duty station, after being stationed MOS School 29 Palms, right? Communication Center operator, got sent to 7th Com Battalion, Camp Hansen, Okinawa. I think initially went to G6, right? There were so many Marines. it's almost like you're in boot camp, right? And your drill instructor's like, wait till you get to the fleet, right? You're going to get eaten up in the fleet. So here I am in the fleet, right? I'm in G6. We had about 30 Marines, too many Marines, right, for a particular shop. And so I got faxed out fleet assistance program to a radio platoon, SATCOM. And so that's where I kind of blended my communication center operator skills with, SATCOM. Fast forward, I was fortunate enough to get stationed in Arlington, Virginia, Henderson Hall. We provided direct support for the Pentagon and the Commandant of the Marine Corps and staff agencies, and so that was just a whole nother level.
Because here's the thing, like you mentioned earlier about exposure and opportunities, right? The Corps is one of the most efficient organizations, well run. It's a well-oiled machine, but it teaches you almost in a way business 101 fundamentals, right? Like there's a mission and there's a way of correlating people and resources and support to do that, man. And I think that type of exposure for you or for anyone that joins the service, it's a great opportunity because it teaches you not only leadership, teaches you organizational skills, and it teaches you how to solve problems. Because comms, I'll tell you what, man, like I had buddies in the comms area. That is something we were so grateful for you guys, man. I always said I always wanted a buddy in the 6 shop because every time something goes down, you need them support. So don't ever piss them off, man. Make sure you freaking give them extra chow all the time because that is something that we were going to miss. So I think that's an amazing accomplishment. So as you transitioned out, brother, what was that like for you? Because here's the thing. We do have a lot of veterans here. Some of them have different transition stories. I know you transitioned out, but then there's a time you came back in. So and that was right after 9/11, brother. So I just really want to give you a shout out and your flowers to that, right? Because I came in 2007, 5 years after, right out of high school. But that says a lot about you, man. Like what you're doing, your patriotism, your love of service, and just wanting to get back. Can you talk more about that?
Yeah, I had gotten out in September 2000. I had, enrolled in some college courses, and so I was going down that path. Where were you at when 9/11 happened? Obviously, I think I was getting ready for school. Father-in-law woke me up and said, "Hey, come check this out. See what's happening on TV." Right. So I saw the second plane hit the tower. Just knew right then, right? You had to kind of get back into the fight. Didn't know exactly how. Obviously, I'm not, infantry, but I'm comm. So I was like, hey, And then the second part of that was, it just kind of festered in me. The plane that hit the Pentagon flew over the Navy Annex, which is where I worked when I was stationed in Arlington, Virginia. So I could just think about the Marines that I knew that were still there. And so they didn't get hit directly, but I just had to figure out a way to get back into the fight. And so, CNN was 24/7 coverage, right, of, the planes hitting the towers and the aftermath and what are we going to do and how are we going to respond. And so I just went online, found some resources and, raised my hand and said, I want to go back in for another year. Don't know exactly what I'm going to do. Put me wherever you need to. But that was my mentality back in. So dropped my shit, dropped everything that I had going on and said, sign me up. Fortunate enough to be sent to Böblingen, Germany, which is not a Marine Corps base. I'm not sure if you guys heard of Patch Barracks. I think that's the biggest Army base around there. It's just different duty, man. You don't hear about it. Normally you hear about Camp Lejeune, Camp Pendleton, and here you are. Panzer Kaserne was the name of the base. You had Army, you had, I think, some Navy SEALs there as well, and just a different duty station. You see all of the other Marines that dropped everything as well. There were some infantry Marines who had been out for several years. They dropped their shit as well, and they went because it was a calling. And so you had this base where you had non-infantry Marines, and they needed guard Marines, they needed sentries, they needed people patrolling, the perimeter of the base because you just didn't know what was happening at that time. So that was the group of Marines that raised their hand and they decided to get back into the fight as well. Changed my life, man.
That says a lot about your character, Carlos. I just want to give you more flowers to that, man, because not everybody will raise their right hand and do it and get out and do it and go back in, right? There's some really good stories from veterans from World War II who wanted to get back into the Korea in the Vietnam fight. But I just love your character and your leadership and what you did, man. So let's talk about that after after service, right? Because
if I could just one other quick story, if I can.
Sure.
So while I was in Bublingen, Germany, I think in 2001, I believe, it was Marines who I think were in Afghanistan and crashed into a mountain, lost their lives, and so you can call it privileged, right, an honor to do a dignified transfer. So Ramstein Air Force Base, we had to transport the bodies of Marines from a C-130 to another one headed to Dover, Delaware Air Force Base. So we had a future sergeant major of the Marine Corps there as well, but to pick up those, it's not even full bodies, right? It's pieces, full of ice. We had to transport those bodies, and again, that's just a life-changing experience. You don't even realize exactly what you're doing while you're doing it. This happens at like 1 or 2 in the morning, so it just kind of maybe it's surreal, right? So coming back and looking at, there's a couple, I think, movies about that as well, just really hit home. Again, another piece that changed my life, man. So sorry to interrupt your question.
No. I was going to say, and you're talking about the 12 Horsemen. I think that movie about those army soldiers that were on horseback. Maybe what you're talking about. I think that was like right towards.
There's another one too of Marines. I can't remember what it is. Returning.
Oh.
I can't think of it.
If you think of it, let me know, because I'm
Okay.
going to watch it. I'm going to broadcast it out. But I agree with you, man. Like those ramp ceremonies. There's a lot of us that I attended in Afghanistan, and I would say I've been to Ramstein on my way to Iraq. But like you said before, it makes you kind of appreciate life a little more, right? I mean, coming from, poverty, at least where I'm coming from, when I got to the Marine Corps, we have this thing they always say, like, man, Marines just know how to get it done, and they have the less resources possible, but it makes us appreciate those things when we do get them a little more, right? So that experience for you probably hit home and just made you appreciate life more, right?
Absolutely. It absolutely did.
Joe, you got anything?
I think it definitely helped us embrace the suck, right? Like especially for Marines, if we can't kind of an upbringing like that, you go into the Marine Corps and everything is just, look, we get to eat 3 meals today, right? Sure, it's the chow hall, but it's 3 meals, right? Like, you mean there's only 4 people in our room? I don't have to share a bed with somebody this time? Like, there's like so many things, and I think it also tends to make us a lot more loyal to the organization. And we've talked about this before. The number of Medal of Honor winners that happen to be Hispanic or Latino is staggering compared to demographics that actually join. So it's just something to say about people that join the military, I guess, especially growing up the way we did. So anyway, thanks.
I wonder if the mentality is like, I have so much to gain, really, and nothing to lose, right? And so, I heard jokes, I think even this morning, right, of Marines jumping on grenades, right, and winning that Medal of Honor and sacrificing themselves. Who the heck does that, right? Why the heck does somebody, do something like that? And so again, I think it's part of it is instinct, right? Instinctively being able to do that, and just your buddy, the guy to your left or to your right. So I think that's why some Marines sacrifice themselves.
Yeah, it's I mean, it's our culture. I always tell folks, it's like a lot of, no offense to other services, but Marines don't get enough credit, man, because we're lowest budget, but we're not in Hollywood or we're not in film, but it's our culture, man. It's what makes us persevere and go through things together. It's a transformation. It's no longer you say I, you say we. And once you get out and you get into the corporate, the business world, like that's a whole transformation. And a lot of times we struggle with that because it's a different type of mindset. It's a different type of language. Like I didn't know what doublespeak was until like I graduated college. I was like, who speaks like that, right? Because I'm from a country boy and I'm from Fresno, and we speak a little differently. We're a little more sincere, simple, authentic. But the military teaches you something like that. So for me, that was a very hard something I had to embrace as far as communication styles and how people communicate and what they're really saying, because they'll say one thing and they'll do another thing, right?
Need something different, yes.
Yeah, so that's from a transition perspective. That was a challenge for me, man. So let's talk about your transition now, Carlos. What was that like for our veterans here that are listening?
I don't think it's any different, right, than any other veteran got out, just kind of trying to reacclimate as a civilian, uh, trying to figure out how to use all of these tools and resources that you've acquired over the last 4 years while you were serving. It's different, man. I just feel like it takes a long time to adjust, even probably within your own family. You may feel like an outsider. So I went through all of that. There's some bad habits that you pick up right in the core, and so you have to kind of come out and get through that as well. Maybe a little bit more dependency on alcohol, just because Marines, work hard, and then but we also play hard, right? So I brought that out with me as well. It took me a while to kind of shake that, and then figure out what I wanted to do, right? How do I leverage this skill set that I've acquired? And so, rolled back in college, finished my associate's degree, pursued electrical engineering. It's been a long road. I'll get to that in a minute. But started my own IT consultancy company, and set out about to provide support for organizations. Right? I still didn't have a solid footing in terms of what I wanted to do. Just trying things out and seeing kind of how I could make the most impact. And then I stumbled into associations, which is where I'm at now. Somewhere in 2012-ish, I worked for a managed services provider, providing IT support. And then I got to work for a national credentialing organization, again, which is where I work now. We certify and recertify nurse anesthetists. Just a whole new world. Not corporate, not quite the pressures of corporate. It was a community, of association professionals and executives who were mission-driven and oriented, much like the Marine Corps. And so I think that's probably why I gravitated towards that as well. I was the shy guy. I would go to a conference. Go ahead, man.
No, finish your thought.
So I would go to these conferences, right? And I was like, what the heck is this, right? So I'd be the quiet guy in the back, right? Just observing. And I would see all of these people putting themselves out there as subject matter experts. And I was like, I want to do something like that. Didn't know exactly, where, but finally mustered up the courage to, go shake hands and talk to people and ask them about, why they do the things that they do, where they acquired that expertise. And so this was relationship building, things that I learned in the Marine Corps as well. And so now I could apply that, in the civilian world. And I look back, right, 2012, every interaction is not a transaction. We'll get into servant leadership, but it's an opportunity to build relationships with people who, at some point down the road, maybe may ask for your help. And so I think that's the way that, we go further together. Go ahead.
Was there a civilian or another veteran that kind of helped you, guide you along the way as you transitioned out, or?
I don't think so. I don't know if there probably were, but I don't know if I actively sought, the veteran assistance. I kind of stood away and I've always tried to figure things out on my own, right? So maybe there were resources there, but I just didn't look for them. So I won't say that they weren't there. I just, I wasn't looking for them.
So I think you hit on something powerful too as well when it comes to relationship building and networking. That's something we do here at TVC, is build the network and create more opportunities. It sounded like you created opportunities for yourself by opening and knocking on those doors and getting yourself visible in front of the right type of people that are mission driven, values driven, and someone that you can potentially, like you said, network with down the road. What would you say for veterans then in that area, right? For veterans that may be transitioning or have already transitioned out and they're professionals like yourself, what would you say to them?
I would say to, actively seek out, maybe veteran groups that you can join, volunteer on a team. I just feel like it's an extension. It's an opportunity for you to kind of, showcase that expertise that you've acquired as well. If people rely on you, and that means something, right? Rather than just kind of getting out and just wandering, join a team, be part of a community. Maybe it's a committee, maybe helping other veterans, to help them transition while you're kind of figuring things out. But I know folks like to do it alone, but I think you'll have a better chance of success if you join a community. Because if you join a community, you get to listen to other people's experiences as well and challenges, right? Maybe there are people who are transitioning that don't actively seek those groups, but maybe stumbled upon those those groups, and it maybe change their lives, right? So you need people like that to say, I've been where you're at, I've walked in your shoes. This is something that I've found that helped me. I think it could also help you as well. So just being able to spread and share that knowledge, I think, of opportunity is a big thing.
No, I love that. I think like the whole thing here on TVC, we always talk about the tribe. The tribe goes as far as the whole community in itself, right? We love to share resources, opportunities. But I think what you hit on here is you're talking about finding your tribe. A lot of veterans struggle with that, right? That's why we have a higher suicide rate or higher homelessness rate, because people are seeking, basically what you said, is community here. Now, let's talk a little about kind of like your mental, your personal development here. And I want to bring up a fellow veteran of mine who focused on that identity transformation, because like when you transition out, we still have, we're still Marines still this day, right? 10 years later, 20 years later, 30 years later, it doesn't matter. But there's some type of identity shift I think we have to consider as we start to go into the business world or civilian or wherever you go. So I want to kind of bring up a fellow veteran of mine who kind of focuses on that on the consulting side. So Lakeisha, floor is yours.
Thank you so much, Jeffrey. Carlos, thank you so much for being here with us on the Veterans Club. We really appreciate you and your insight. You are truly a real renowned business person and a veteran. And I feel that you do so much for the world, right? So my question is, with your teams and with your businesses, what is your perspective when it comes to understanding mental health, not just for yourself, but for others, and for them to actually hang on to it? What are you implementing with that, and for them to be able to present that to the team as well?
Yeah, so I think burnout is a real thing in terms of mental health, right? And so, remote work is something that we're living now. People tend to, I think statistics show that people tend to work more from the home. So I think that increases, right, the chances of, leading to burnout. So how do you counter that? What are some things? And so, again, I think there's a nonprofit that I'm associated with. It's called Association Latinos. And I'll get to a little bit more about that. But we have like standing weekly meetings where on Fridays come in, bring your opportunities, bring your life struggles, and let's talk about that. Let's unpack that. People need to, absolve themselves of some of these things, and they need to talk about, some of these things. It can't just be all about work. It has to be about life. There's got to be a balance there. So those are some of the things that we do to try to counter that. But you always have to, there's the leadership by example, right? I'm guilty of working around the clock. I'm guilty of waking up early and being that example. So people look at that and they want to follow that and they want to emulate that. So I've got to be intentional to say, take some time off. I'm sending an email. You don't have to answer this right now. Well, I'll wait till Monday morning. But I think there's a variety of things that, leaders can do to try to counter, that eventual burnout if you're a workaholic like me. Hope that answers your question.
It absolutely answers my question, Carlos. Thank you so much. Your team appreciate you. We appreciate you as well. Definitely, that makes us feel wanted and stay on the team. So thank you so much for answering that for us all.
You're very welcome.
Joe, you got anything? All right. So Carlos, real quick, I do want to hit on that point because I had a friend of mine, he's a fellow Marine. He was the CEO. And the way he combated that is he had his Marines from like business hours from 8 to 5. And he said, if you don't get all your work done between that time, by the time I'm clocking out, I don't want to see you here. Like he would just kick everybody out at 5 o'clock sharp. He said, you have 8 hours to get your work done. Go get it done. And I said, that is some leadership 101 there, right? Because a lot of times we end up, and I hate to say this, but like efficiency does work to a certain extent, right? And it all depends on the organization, or if you're a business owner yourself, time is everything. And that's something we it's precious. The only thing we have, it's big, it's bigger than currency in itself. And it's how do we find time to prioritize the things that we want to accomplish in life? Because sometimes busy work is nothing wrong with that, but if it's not progress, you're not actually, going after the mission, then it can kind of hold you back a little bit. So I think from a work-life balance, find out what your priorities are in life, not just your professional, but also personal, because personal feeds the professional. Like if your cup ain't full, you're not going to be doing well in the professional business world, bottom line. So any tips on that you want to share?
I struggle with that myself, right? And so, again, I mentioned I'm a workaholic, and I'm part of so many volunteer committees and boards, right? So I've got to figure out how to do the work that needs to be done. But one thing that I do, and you asked the question earlier, what tips do I give my teams? I think some of my teammates are, workaholics as well, right? So I don't require, that they have to do something on the weekends. I think passion probably leads, to them working those extra hours. There's something that we have to do. We've got to get it done. I don't have to tell them that they have to do it, right? So we meet, we huddle up, we talk about it. We know the urgency. We know the timelines and the milestones. And so I've got my team sometimes on the weekend sending me text messages and sending me chat messages and saying, hey, look at this data set, how it relates to the project. And so I don't say, hey, why are you working on the weekends? Don't do that. I take it. I encourage them to do whatever makes them feel comfortable. If they want to disconnect, they can easily do that. But if they want to work as well, I don't tell them no. So I don't know if that's counter to what you guys are talking about.
No, man. I mean, I think passion, and I'll let Joe step in a little bit, but I think you mean passion, right? Mission is totally different because we have that mission-driven mindset here. I would say this, right? Because like when we get out, we look at a lot of things as life or death situations. It's just like, you were talking about the Ramsey runner. That is a life or death situation. Like one of the hardest things for me when I transitioned out is, and I always tell these folks here is like, Tom's over here complaining because the printer's not working. And I'm like, Tom, no one's dying. Like, right. And that was hard. And that was really hard because I was like, well, Tom doesn't care. Right. He hasn't been your experience, but I can't say, well, he hasn't been, he hasn't served. I can't, I haven't been in his shoes. I don't know what that's like. But to your point here, if we're driving on the mission, if you got those mission-driven folks and you guys got to meet a deadline, that makes total sense, man. It's just, I think work-life balance is different for every organization and how you prioritize. But I think your leadership is effective because if you give your folks that type of autonomy, which I think is what drives retention. Let's talk about that, right? Retention and recruitment. A lot of folks want autonomy. They want an ability to say, hey, give me a mission and let me go and and get my feet wet a little bit so I can learn, bump my head. And it sounds like that's what you're doing with your team, leaders like yourself.
Some people want to be prescriptive, right? They want you to be prescriptive and tell me exactly what I need to do. But if you think about the organization and again, the mission, I go back to that always, you need these leaders or these people to step into leadership roles. And so at some point, I'm not going to tell you what to do anymore. Right? If I hired you and then a year later, I'm still telling you what to do, I probably made a mistake. So at some point you have to own your particular role, come to me with not just ideas, but solutions as well. So I try to empower my team and put them into those leadership roles, present on a small topic, a small project, you take ownership of that, present to the entire organization, which can be 35 to 40 people, step into that role, see how it is, see how you react to that. It's going to take multiple iterations of that. But I think, coming out of that experience, I think you're going to be positioned to be a better leader, because I'm trying to set you up to be successful in that leadership role, even if you don't see yourself as a leader. Again, there are certain people at your organization that don't have the title, but people naturally gravitate towards. Those are the people that are leaders, whether they want to or not. Those are the people that you have to kind of bring into your circle and cultivate and get them to think about, how they impact other people. They may not realize it, but I think those are just some things where
powerful.
You can cultivate your team.
Yeah, go ahead, Joe.
I was going to say I think it also goes on the leadership, the guidance of the mission, right? Like if you're telling them to take a hill or if you're telling them why you need them to take the hill. Right, there's a difference between take that hill or take that hill in order to deny enemy access to whatever things like that. Like it's the higher echelon type of leadership, I think, that allows that type of flexibility in their day to day. Right, someone said it, and I think we've had them on the show before. They had talked about the difference between procedure and technical thing or something like that. It's like, I'm going to give you the guidelines on what I want my business to operate like. How you get to the end result is your journey, don't break any of the rules, don't break any of the equipment, don't break any laws. But if you can figure out how to meet the end state in a more efficient manner than, 1 through 10, you just got to take out the odd numbers because those steps are fixable. I think that's a brilliant way to do it, Carlos. And that's kind of how I understood when you were explaining empowering your team and giving them the right tools, right? And that tool comes in leadership and flexibility in their mission. So.
Yeah, I would say there's a reason you hired them, right? And so if you're prescriptive and you say do it my way all the time, you're not going to allow them to, use their own creativity and problem solving to get to that same destination point, right? Which is the completion of the mission or the completion of that particular project. So I think you got to give them some latitude.
Carlos, I'm going to say this because I we talk about it a lot. People a lot of former military personnel talk about leadership, but what they talk about is people followed their orders. What you're describing is actual leadership. It's people are doing their job and improving, not because you're telling them to do it, but because it's the proper procedure for them to evolve in the ecosystem. Does that make sense? You've developed a form of leadership where people can evolve and grow instead of just do what they're told. And I think people get that confused all the time. People doing what they're told doesn't make you a leader. People evolving their mission.
That's what we experience in the core, right? Discipline is an instant response and willing obedience to orders, right? So that's kind of what you kind of grew up with and some of your life experiences. And so, you struggle with that. You want to continue to follow orders, but you just don't want to follow them blindly. Now I need to know why you want me to do some of these things, right? I'm not just going to, blindly follow orders. I need to know the purpose of it. I need to know what the outcome of that is going to be. So you struggle with that a little bit.
Carlos, I mean, you're hearing something really important here, and I want my folks to really, because I want my folks that you're listening to understand that what he's really saying is tell them why they're doing it. If you're a business owner or you're still a military leader or government leader or political leader, if you will, people want to know why they're doing it, right? As long as you give them that opportunity, you give them that bigger picture thing on why they're taking that hill or on why they need to do that strategic partnership or on why they need to go and attack or target that market. They want to know why. Tell them what the mission is. If you just tell them something tactical at a tactical level, for example, is more of the administrative side. They really don't know why. What's the whole reason behind it? Sometimes people are a little skeptical, but if you tell them why, you're more transparent. I think what Carlos is getting to here is you're more transparent with them. That's a form of building trust, right? And I think that's servant leadership 101 right there, Carlos. You're saying, hey, I'm going to build the vision and mission, give you these guiding principles, and I'm going to allow you to go and execute based on those principles, but I'm going to give you autonomy. That's how your organization, that's how you foster trust. That's how you foster collaboration, creativity, autonomy. And guess what? Your organization is going to have a bigger return on investment than if you're just all day nickel and diming them by micromanaging. Nobody likes micromanagement. It's just
nobody likes it.
It tells people that I don't trust you, and it's not good for long-term thinking here. So let's go back. Let's go kind of a little more fast forward into now your involvement. Why? Because I want to know. Right, we're talking about why. Why did you get involved in the community, man? Because you're part of what? A couple of associations, man. And I'm actually really proud of you, the fact that you are standing up a Veterans Chamber of Commerce. Because one thing that we talk about here on TVC, Carlos, is creating more opportunities for each other, right? Talent is everywhere, but opportunity is not. And like you said before, it's being in the room with those folks where you can make deals or they can open a door for you, right? And I'd love for you to talk more about kind of your experience on why you got involved with some of these organizations, man, because, I mean, that's awesome. The fact that you're creating more business opportunities for veterans in the Chicago or Illinois region. And tell you what, that actually is going to tackle some of these challenges that we're seeing in the veteran community, which is veteran suicide and veteran homelessness. If you can give veterans an opportunity to a career or a business opportunity, you're actually putting more food on their table and giving them that new sense of purpose. So you are kind of attacking two of those problems with what you're doing.
Yeah, I will. Let me start with Association Latinos, right? And that's kind of, one of the not-for-profits that, I was part of a team to be able to found that. And so here we are in the association profession. We were having a Hispanic Heritage Month, discussion about a research study that had happened, and 2% or 3% of the association that we were talking about, that we were partnering with, there was only 2 or 3% Latino representation in that membership, right? And so right there, we're talking about what we can do for during Hispanic Heritage Month, and the big elephant in the room was that where the heck are other Latinos at? Right? This is a massive profession. Where are we at? And so after that conversation, I kid you not, we started to meet every week. It was 5 of us that continued to meet every week for probably a good solid 2 years. So I went about the business of starting a LinkedIn page because I want to meet people where they are. We need to get the message out. We need people to that message to resonate. We need people to draw people into our cause. Design the logo, register the domains, created the website, all of those different things to didn't know it at the time, right? But kind of starting that the not-profit business. And what we saw from our community is that they attached to it. We saw other. I'll give you one example, right? Black Association executives. It's another small group within associations. They're like, what are you guys doing over here, right? We're paying attention to that. We want to do some of the same things. So now we started to kind of inspire other people, to do something similar. So lack of representation, lack of opportunity, and you talk about, low-level managers, mid-level, all the way up to C-suite. We were just not there. We were just not being represented. You talk about serving on nonprofit boards. You just didn't see that, right? The same 2 to 3%, maybe 4%. And that's just not just the nonprofit industry, right? You look across America in all industries, right? Hollywood and, for-profit, it's the same 2 to 4% representation. So how the heck is it that we are, 20, 30%, of the population, but only 2% represented? And so, that's something that I think motivated us to continue. So we incorporated in 2023, and we just haven't looked back, right? So we had about 20 volunteer committee members, I think last year. We doubled that this year. And so people are excited. People are, they feel welcomed in this particular space. I think people said, I can say my name the way that it's supposed to be pronounced when I'm around you guys. And I could never do that before. And we talk about being your authentic self all the time, right? And that's one thing in terms of like, how could you not pronounce your name? So, even I'm guilty, right? Cardenas, right? My last name is Cardenas. But just to be able to empower people, to say their name in their native language, I think was powerful as well. So we've got a lot of work to do. I'll stop there. The Veteran Chamber of Commerce, small business owner myself, but I will say that one particular colleague, Frank Gutierrez, I'm not sure if you guys know him. He works for the Chicago Transit Authority. He's a former Marine, but he also enlisted in the Army afterwards. I think he just retired last year after about 20 years of service. You'll talk about people who have a passion. This guy is up there, right? So I guess he saw some of the things that I was doing, and he's like, hey, man, you called me the nonprofit expert. I'm not sure how true that is. But he's like, hey, I'm thinking of starting a Veteran Chamber of Commerce. Like, I think you can help me, right? So had some coffee, talked about, the mission. We actually created the mission and the vision together. Access to capital, business opportunities. I kept hearing that veteran business owners, it was an uphill battle to try to get, the certifications needed within the state. And not just at the state level, but at the city level, municipality level. And so a lot of different obstacles, right, to get that veteran certification. And so, we thought, what can we do here, right? So again, we're all connected, to the veteran community in some form. So, we formed the organization, we incorporated last year. We went about the business of forming the board. We're starting to do strategic planning now. It's just, we want to take it slow and we're being intentional. We can rush, but I don't know what good that does us. And so I will say we are in the strategic planning phase still.
I'm so proud of you, brother. And I want to give the floor over to Keisha if she has any thoughts here.
Working the mic. Yes, I do have thoughts. Carlos, I love and what I'm hearing. Thank you so much for championing the teams and recognizing just what we need to do to move forward. You know, one thing that I will say, just, you know, for you, what is your mission and goal for each and every person that's in your team to really evolve, be their authentic self, talk what you said, span everything correctly, and actually implementing it in the journey?
You know, I want my teammates, you know, whichever organization that is, that could be the tech council, I want them to leverage their particular skill sets, right? We talk about diversity. Everybody has a superpower, right? And everybody doesn't have the same superpower, right? So I think that's what makes a team powerful, because everybody brings these different skill sets, and we got to figure out a way to kind of leverage those superpowers, right? So that's what I encourage. Me, I work in technology. I've got some folks on my team that work in maybe board governance, maybe more in association management. So I look at that. I learn from that. It's easy to make mistakes in terms of things that you're not an expert on, but you can't let that, you know, stop you, right? Fear. So that's what I encourage my team, you know, to do, to bring those particular skill sets, because I think that's, if we can maximize our particular experiences towards a particular mission, I think we'll be better off, you know, in doing that. And I think that helps us accomplish the mission, you know, even more so than not doing that, right? So hope that answers your question. Probably took the long route.
Yes, it does. I really appreciate it. Thank you so much for coming on the Veterans Club. I appreciate you and look forward to seeing you again. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Lakeisha. Joe?
Yeah, no, I love that you brought up the superpower, and as you were saying that, I was thinking, and I don't know who said it. Somebody else said this. I just kind of like to amplify things that I really love hearing. You talk about a superpower, and I think the way you explain it is you're not highlighting your superpower. You're highlighting your team's superpower, and I think that's kind of the key, right? We all have a superpower, but when we're in a team, I think our job is to amplify the other's superpower. Right? It's not necessarily about how good I can do it. It's let's get everybody else's superpower highlighted. And I love that you do that and you empower your team that way. So thank you.
Yeah, don't get me wrong. Sometimes I have to step in, right, and show flex my superpower, right? But and maybe just to be that example, to give others that motivation to take that first step. But there are times where I have to.
Since we're Marines, so we always got to inspect and not expect. So
exactly. Yes.
That is servant leadership 101. I want to go back to your involvement on the associations and the Veterans Chamber here, because what I'm hearing is your advocacy for people who don't feel like they're seeing themselves reflected in the business world or sometimes even in the military, and you stepped in here. That's something that resonated with me because I used to chair veterans employee resource groups, Latino employee resource groups. And one thing that I learned from there is what I apply here is I always bring on folks that are successful like yourself so we can show them that, hey, you can be that too. You can be that Carlos Cardenas or that Danny Vargas that we had last week or anyone that we've had on the show, veterans. It's just sometimes we get stuck in our heads and we feel like there's no way out. But, you know, Carlos is a great demonstration of his resilience, his ability to, as we always say, adapt and overcome, right? If there's not a way, Carlos freaking found a way, and look where he is now. He's doing some great things in that. But what are some of those key lessons or key moments that you've learned from being involved and advocating for people that are underrepresented? And where do you want to take that, Carlos? What's like the next milestone for you guys?
You know, I would say you've got to find a way. There's going to be obstacles no matter what you do, right? So you've got to find a way and figure out. And so I think that's one of the things that the Marine Corps probably instilled in me is figure out a way to do it. It might be untraditional. You might not be asking for permission either, right? You might be asking for forgiveness. But I think you need to figure out a way to get stuff done. You talk about inviting, you know, particular veterans on this show. I think we need to think about how do we, not everybody is, has the same type of privilege and access, right? And so how do we get those veterans who are struggling to come on this show and talk about, you know, some of their challenges as well? Not just the people like me talking to say like, hey, look where I'm at, and you know, you could do it too. Get them on the show, coach them up, right, and help them throughout, because your veterans need that help, right? So going back to your question in terms of the things that we do at the Veteran Chamber, I hear constantly the veteran business owner, getting opportunity, state contracts, for example, right? So we've got the Illinois Department of Transportation, and so got veteran business owners who, rightfully so, right? They've sacrificed, they serve their country, they want a piece of that pie as well. Illinois, I don't think has legislation, to make sure that they have a piece of that pie. I think New York State is one that does. So we're looking at some of those things and how do we bring that economic opportunity, to the veteran business owner. What's next for us? Again, I think I mentioned strategic planning. We're talking about veteran resource groups. We're talking about partnering with other for-profit organizations because they have veterans in their ranks, right? How do we talk to them? Maybe one of those veterans wants to be an entrepreneur. So we want to take that conversation to these organizations, again, to give them that example, that aspiration of, and that confidence to be able to maybe take that step themselves. I think we're all entrepreneurial by virtue of being a Marine, maybe not all, but a good majority. And so, how do you tease out that motivation, that desire, to branch out and take the road less traveled?
Carlos, you mentioning that the legislation's being written and making sure that veteran small businesses kind of do get that preference. I think it's super important that we actually participate in those things as veterans. I think there's so much we need to do. We actually had a guest on here. There's litigation. Was it finance? That last guest, remember, he was talking about how there are lobbyists that will lobby for veteran ideas to get put into law. But those lobbyists have ulterior motives because the law that they actually create is under the guise of supporting veterans, but then who it really supports is somebody else and not necessarily the veteran. And I think that that's super important because there are ways to describe your company as a small veteran business, and you're really this multi-conglomerate organization that just has a couple of veterans on board somewhere. So it's very important to be a participant, and I love that you're advocating that. And I think that is something that we need to amplify our voice as veterans to make sure that when we are getting those legislations created, that they are truly impacting veterans and not some ulterior lobbyist group. So thanks for sharing that, man. That's a great topic. And I think that's something we should discuss further, like some other time, maybe in an open forum. I think that would be a great.
Yeah, I would say people to your point, right? People take advantage of veterans, right? And in many forms, right? And legislation is just one example. So I think us as veterans, we have to be on the lookout for some of those things and call it out. And I've seen plenty of that, in terms of those certifications, and people just like to take advantage. You talk about veteran service disability and organizations who kind of, I would say, prey on veterans to some extent. Hey, we'll get you. They promise the world, right? We'll get you a certain percentage in terms of disability rating, and veterans believe that, right? And sometimes they get taken advantage of. And so again, I think veterans like ourselves, need to step in and make sure that stops. We put a stop to it, however we can.
Yeah, I love that, man, because, hey, like I said, you're back to your advocacy perspective. One thing that we stress is the veteran community, man. If you take advantage of a veteran, the veteran community will know about it and your reputation will precede you. So for those of you that are in that space, just please, I recommend you do not do that to a veteran here. But back on the business ownership side, veterans are some of the most innovative. I have to speak for Marines, man. You always give a Marine downtime. They're some of the most creative and innovative people that I know. And what you're doing is you're opening up opportunities within Illinois to get those veterans access to those business opportunities by advocating for them and being on the front line for that. I always tell folks, like, okay, so what do veterans do when it comes to business? Well, they almost $1 trillion in GDP. It's a growing community, and a lot of them are getting out. And, oh, by the way, I think, I've been reading that America's, economy is not growing as much. Why not get folks like the veteran community plugged into that space so we can maintain our competitive advantage? That is something I think we need to consider and be not only consider, but actually put that into execution, Carlos. So I think what you're doing is you're right where you need to be to get veterans plugged into that space. And I think folks need to buy more veterans. I will say that buy local all the time, but buy veteran. Ladies and gentlemen, when you buy it from a veteran, you are directly helping someone from your community, right? We always talk about these problems of a veteran suicide or a veteran homelessness. Well, we know sometimes how the community or the state or local levels provide that type of funding. Well, why don't you do that funding yourself by buying a product or service from them? That's a way to kind of attack the problem in itself, right? Economically. Because sometimes, to Carlos's point, there's a lot of bureaucratic things at play that you may not be aware of, and that funding is very seasonal or yearly. But if you want to help a veteran, buy from them, because you're only helping them, but you're helping America itself.
And not just buy from veterans, but I think I would love America to hire more veterans as well,
Yes.
right? And so
Yes.
we have the benefit of being, the average of 4 years, right, of service, and you acquire leadership skills. You acquire the intangibles. You acquire, leadership at the team level, at the organizational level. So why would you not take advantage of that? So there are veterans who, can, again, we're mission oriented, mission driven. We can come into your organization, without missing a step, right, and start to change the culture of the organization. I think a lot of veterans have that particular power and life experience, and they've done that before, and so they can come into your organization, just have a different way of kind of doing the same things as their civilian counterparts. Maybe veterans are a little bit more abrasive, and that's okay. I think there has to be some sort of understanding because, to your point, why are veterans starting more businesses? Going back to the why, what's the purpose, right? I think part of that, I can't tell you based on research, but I think, veterans have that trouble, again, reacclimating. And so how do I fit in with my civilian counterparts? And now I got this 20-something-year-old dude micromanaging me, right, when I can get stuff done on my own. And so maybe that's the incentive, for them to be their own bosses. I think there's something there. Again, that's a question that I continue to ask myself.
Keisha, Joe?
No, I was gonna say I think one of the key things here is when civilian companies learn how to train veterans on what their business does, the way the military trains us to do different technical skills. Like, because one of the biggest things, if the civilians could tap into how the military does our training, there's nothing that we couldn't do because we're so trainable. Like I think part of the transition is learning how to be trainable. And they do such a great job. Like, there's people. I was thinking about it. There are guys that come out of high school, go into the Navy or Navy or Air Force, and they learn nuclear propulsion in 18 months. Like, that is a high level, like, collegiate type of training that some people study for 5 or 6 years before they go and work on nuclear propulsion. Guys in the Navy do it in 18 months. It's insane. And then they'll go and work on a nuclear sub or a nuclear aircraft carrier, actual doing the systems. So once the civilians kind of figure out how do we train these guys in what we're doing and bringing them in the teams, they'll be unstoppable. I really do believe that. So.
Yeah, I also believe that, and I know we're at time, but again, the association profession, it's the same thing. You don't see representation of veterans, and so I think about that as well. I've reached out to Student Veterans of America to create that pipeline into associations. Again, we could benefit from veteran leadership. There's just not enough of us, and I want to bring more in.
100%. Real quick, Carlos, can you tell us about Semper Wi-Fi here? By the way, ladies and gentlemen, because there's a QR code that I would like for you to scan, but can you tell us more about what Semper Wi-Fi is, what it does?
Yeah, so just a kind of a spin on Semper Fi, right? And so when I was thinking about, creating my small business, created that name, and I used it for my small business at some point, but now I use it for photography. So if you go to semperwifi.com, you'll see a lot of my street photography from traveling. wide variety of, photography. Bella Wood is on there as well. Got a chance to visit that, historic site of, for Marines. But take a look at that. I think I'm the type of person that likes to think in terms of ideas and creation, and that's a way for me to express my creativity. So it just gives me, there's so many lessons there in terms of, the association profession, business leader, foresight, anticipation, in terms of photography. And so that's one of my hobbies.
And by the way, ladies and gentlemen, I have seen his work. It is world class work here. I mean, if you want someone to, at your next event or the Ton Tavern opening that's going to come next 2025, I got to reach out to the founder of that nonprofit. Carlos is your guy here, because what he's doing is he's capturing moments, right? A lot of times we talk about legacy, why I want to bring on veterans from Vietnam or Korea or even World War II, because we're talking about legacy here. And Carlos is doing some phenomenal work. So if you have an event, even a local community event, Carlos is your guy here. I mean, the guy is very well accomplished. But I do, real quick, before we kind of end this, I want to give a congratulations to Carlos, because I've been through it myself, right? I'm a Cal State San Marcos graduate, but Carlos here graduated, and I'm not going to steal his thunder here, recently with his bachelor's. Carlos, can you talk about that experience, man? Because you're talking about personal development and self-development here, man. So congratulations on that.
Yeah, it's man, I can't tell you how happy and I am to have finally accomplished this. Again, I got my associate's degree in computer science back in 2004. Started to pursue electrical engineering. Life, work got in the way. Just had to stop taking classes. I think back in 2016, got an opportunity, to go back, and thankfully, a good majority, even if it was like calculus and physics and differential equations, they transferred over, to Purdue Global. And so I think just based on my experience, it's changed, right? So my goals have changed. Now I'm more of in a leadership position, and so organizational management, was something that I thought about. So because all of those credits transferred, I was able to wrap up the degree in probably a year and a half at Purdue Global. A couple of weeks ago, I traveled to Lafayette, Indiana, to cross that stage. Again, just a surreal moment to see kind of the tears in everybody's eyes in terms of, this was a long journey. But that's over and done with, right? So cool, pat on the back, but what's next, right? So that's my mentality right now.
No, man, I just want, again, I'm going to give you flowers, man. I understand some folks, it's a little hard to accept that, man, but congratulations again. I know what that's like. Negotiating and freaking going at it with my professors. I remember, man, it was a great experience. And I love that your dog here, because he's the one that's telling us we're at time here. But man, thank you again for doing that. And bottom line, if you're listening, for your veteran or civilian, never quit.
Never quit.
Today you have something to live for. You woke up today. Never quit, ladies and gentlemen. So Carlos, we look forward to potential collaborations and partnerships and having you back on. And hopefully you can join us for the after show, brother.
Absolutely. Thanks for having me on. I appreciate it.
Thank you so much. All right, ladies and gentlemen, Veterans Club signing out. We will see you guys at the after show.